Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you caught the last couple videos, you guys know that we've been fishing cold, muddy water, and I seem to just not be able to avoid it. Well, today I changed up my strategy a little bit. We did get some more rain this week, but I knew that if I headed to a river instead of a lake, it was probably gonna be a little bit better conditions, and that's exactly what happened. So behind us, we have a boat ramp that's about 30 minutes from my house on the James River, and today I'm going out to give you guys as many tips as possible on winter bass fishing, especially on a river. My goal today is to catch 3 fish in 4 hours. Come with me. I'm gonna teach you guys as much as I possibly can, and by the end of this, you guys are gonna be better anglers. Let's get it, guys. So just to talk a little strategy before we get out in the raging wind out here. I wanna fish this creek over here to the right. I found this creek last time I was here, and it's just perfect for spawning bass. But what I'm gonna do first is I'm gonna fish this main river area. To the left out here, we have a pretty steep drop off, and it drops off into about 10 to 15 feet. Bass in the winter really like that vertical drop. So I'm gonna fish a jerkbait and a drop shot around that a little bit first. Then we're gonna flip around to the other side and work our way back to this pocket. I do have a glide bait I wanna try on today, so if we can get out of the wind a little bit back there, I'll tie on that glide and see if we can get some followers. All right, first lure we're gonna start off with is a jerkbait. Now, for you guys who like to fish in winter, or if you're trying winter fishing this year, the jerkbait and the drop shot are the 2 best lures you can possibly fish. If I was only able to take out 2 lures for the entire winter, these would be my 2 lures of choice. For my power fishing bait today, I'm gonna alternate between this jerkbait and then I have a crankbait as well too. A lot of times when you get these windy conditions, it breaks the water up just enough to where they're gonna aggressively hunt down their prey. I'm gonna try this crankbait here. I have a little DT8, kind of like a natural bluegill pattern. Doesn't feel too bad when you get out of the wind, but man, I did not dress appropriately here. All right, let's go ahead and head to the drop shot here. I really like the drop shot on your steeper banks. During winter, those fish really like to relate to vertical cover. So a little bit off the cover and drag it at a 45-degree angle down the cover so you can try to figure out which depth they're sitting at. All right, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna flip it around. We're gonna head down this bank and we're gonna head to that pocket I was telling you guys about at the beginning. Try to get out of this wind a little bit to water where it's a little bit more calm and we can see what's going on. And my strategy for this side is pretty simple. I'm just gonna take this spinnerbait with a little boot tail on it and run down here and just cast this pretty much the entire time. There's a lot of wood laydowns in the water here, so I think this spinnerbait is gonna be effective at drawing any fish up out of that wood that are sitting there waiting for a meal. We're gonna reel it as slow as we can. The only thing we wanna do is feel those blades going. As long as we feel those blades going, we're reeling it fast enough. Good thing about this bait is I can really get it up in that cover. Spinnerbaits are extremely weedless, so it comes through all that stuff very, very easily. All right, we have made it to our destination, which is this beautiful creek back here. Spent a little bit of time fishing the main river, about 1 hour out of our 4 hours so far, and the wind was just brutal out there. I did not dress for success, and one tip I'll give you guys is you always want to be comfortable. I have plenty of warm clothes that could have made today a lot more bearable, but I just didn't bring them, and that's my mistake. So always stay comfortable when you're out there. Bring more than you need because you can always take off the rest. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go down through here. We're gonna fish a drop shot, we're gonna fish a jerkbait. I'm gonna show you guys how to fish those 2 lures. I'm gonna move slowly up this creek and see if we can find anything. Something that draws my eye is that giant rock face there. And the reason why I like fishing big creeks like this is you can spend a lot of time here and treat it as its own lake. There's bound to be a whole ecosystem in this creek, so I don't have to spend time running all over the river to try to find fish when I can just hunker down in one area and fish it for 3 hours and see if there's fish here. And I know a lot of my viewers are new to the drop shot, so I'm gonna give you guys some tips on fishing it. What you wanna do is you wanna cast it out there. Let it sink to bottom. You have it on semi-slack line. And what you're gonna do is you're gonna fish this exactly like you would fish a jig or a Texas rig. So once it settles down, I'm gonna keep an eye on my line. I'm gonna move it about 3 to 5 feet towards me, reel up my slack. In the winter, you typically want to let it set for about 5 to 10 seconds. This water is very cold, so the longer I let it sit, the more likely I am to get a bite. So I'm gonna let it set for about 10 seconds on semi-slack line, drag it about 3 to 5 feet to me. And And that's literally it, guys. Again, you're just fishing it like a jig. You're just fishing it like a Texas rig. That's all this is. For the length in between the hook and the weight, if you're fishing rock, I probably recommend having about 6 to 8 inches. If you're fishing grass, you wanna make sure that line is long enough to keep that bait above the grass. And you'd be surprised how well this actually comes through wood. So I'm casting up here on this steep bank, right where this wood's at. In order to keep from casting it up in the trees, a lot of times you want to cast it on like a roll cast at an underhanded angle. That's going to prevent you from casting in the trees, because trees are the worst enemy to a drop shot. You'll get that thing tangled up so bad and so easily, you'll just have to cut it all off. To me, I see this rock and I really think high percentage area. That rock is a huge face. It's going to soak up a ton of that sunlight and make it warmer for any fish around it. And I was going to come out yesterday, but yesterday it was even colder. I think we had a high of 45 yesterday, and today the high is about 53. If you guys pay attention to the time, we're coming right up on 3 o'clock. 3 o'clock is actually the warmest part of the day. When you're in the winter, you always want to fish during the warmest part of the day. There is a morning bite that goes on in the winter, but once you're past that morning bite, it gets pretty brutal. I like to fish at the warmest part of the day because I feel like it gets me the best odds of getting bit. And when I come up on something like this, something high percentage, I'm really going to focus on fishing this and fishing it extremely slow. There's no need to rush by. We're not going and flipping a ton of stuff today. We're really taking these areas we think are high percentage areas, and we're focusing very, very hard on those areas. In the winter, vertical structure is the name of the game, and this rock is a perfect example of that. So I want to cast it as close to that structure as I possibly can and slowly drag it off that structure. Be careful when you're fishing this kind of stuff on the river, because the last thing I want to do is get under this and have a rock fall on me. That would make for a very bad day. So always take safety first. Still sitting in 10 feet, so I'm working my way down through here with this drop shot. Once we get to a little bit less steep bank, I'm gonna pull out that flat-sided crankbait, toss that around a little bit. But the thing about winter fishing, guys, is it just is gonna take a while for you to get a bite. Unless you have a special lake, a special pond, a special spot, if you're fishing new water, it's gonna take you a while. You just gotta get out there and grind it out, because they're filled with their eggs, they're filled to the brim with fish. So you take a 20-inch fish, a lot of times that fish is gonna be 4 to 5 pounds, but in the winter, you got a 5 or 6 pounder on your hands. And then just imagine you catch a 23, 24, 25-inch fish. Now we're looking at a potential 10 pounder. Now that we're up the creek a little bit, I have this flat-sided crankbait. I'm just working this real slow over all this wood, all this debris. You'll see me reeling, but a lot of times I'm just reeling up slack, kind of pulling it with the rod tip. We wanna make sure we work it as slow as we can. Haven't seen any bait balls on the graph yet. We're coming up on a little inflow here where it gets a little bit more shallow. You can see if there's any smallmouth sitting there. On the way back, I'm gonna pull out a glide bait and fish around here a little bit, stand up, see if I can't see any followers. That might at least tell me where they're at. Still pretty deep back here, about 11 feet. I showed you guys how to work that drop shot earlier. I'm gonna show you guys how to work this jerk bait here. So I have a Megabass Vision 110+1. I have it right now on 12-pound line. So this will normally dive 8 to 12 feet. That's on 8-pound test. I have it on 12-pound test. And the reason I did that is because I don't want this quite to dive that deep. I want this to stay around 6 to 8 feet maximum. Because my thought process was I'm gonna throw it around these trees. Just like that flat-sided crankbait, I like to run it over the tips of the trees where it meets it at the deepest point. With this, I don't want it to touch the trees because it is not very weedless whatsoever, but I want to get it out there. And I want it to go over the tops of the trees. So I put this on a rod with a little bit heavier line. I would normally use 8-pound test to get it as deep as possible, but in this case, I don't want that. So what you wanna do is you wanna have a nice long cast, reel it down about 3 or 4 times to get it to depth. And then on the slack line, I like to go 1, 2, 3. One handle turn, 1, 2, one handle turn, 3. One handle turn, 1, 2, one handle turn, 3. That's how I like to do it. When you're hitting your jerkbait, you're always hitting on slack line. You're never hitting on tight line because you're not gonna get the correct action. How you know you did it right is if you see that rod vibrate at the end there. See that rod vibration at the end there? You'll feel it in your hand. That's how you know you did it right. So again, we're gonna cast it out there. A few reel turns to get it down to depth. Slack line, 1, 2, 3. In the winter, we wanna give it around 8 to 10 seconds. Sometimes you can go 3 to 5, but most of the time in the winter, it's gonna be 8 to 10. 1, 2, 3. Just gonna let it sit there. 1, 2, 3. You can actually use soldering wire on the front hook to give you a slow sink. When the water is very cold like this, I like the slow sink. And if you guys want to know more about how to fish the jerkbait, I'll leave a link down below. I did a video last winter where I went into a ton of detail, so that should be helpful for you guys. But again, one more time, the gist of it, cast it out there, 3 to 5 reels to get it down. On slack line, 1, 2, 3. Let it sit for about 8 to 10 seconds. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. The bigger the bill the jerkbait has, the easier you want to hit it. So this 110 plus 1, I shouldn't be yamming on it. I should be gently hitting it. Because if you hit that bigger bill too hard, it'll throw off your action. We're gonna go with something with a completely different strategy, and that is removing the spinnerbait here and putting on a giant glide bait. Now glide baits are hit or miss during the winter, but at this point we have nothing to lose. So we're gonna tie on this glide bait, throw it around here in this pocket a little bit and see what we can do. Worst case scenario, I did bring the muskie rod, so we'll hit the main lake for a little bit and try to find some muskie as well. Let's have some fun with this guy, see if we can't get some follows. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna sit as tight to the bank as I possibly can. Kind of just parallel this bad boy on the bank. Throw it out there, let it sink for a few seconds. It's a slow sink, but this one actually sinks pretty quickly from what I've seen online. And our goal with this bait right now is just to get some follows. A couple follows on this, make me happy. See if they're active. Go. Glide baits are really hit or miss in the winter. They can be phenomenal and they can get absolutely nothing done. So fair to this guy. So I want to experiment around a little bit. Toss it for probably 30 to 45 minutes max. If we're getting some follows, of course, we'll toss a little bit more. But if we don't get any follows, it's not something I want to harp on for a long time. Action is really, really good on the Chad Shad, guys. It's not a cheap bait. It's about 50 or 60 bucks, but I can guarantee come springtime, we're gonna chase some winter fatties down with this guy. These glide baits are really good on highland reservoirs, lakes that stay extremely clear. That's where I really like to throw them. I haven't had too much luck in dirty water, but you throw them around in clear water and they can be absolutely dynamite. Cast it out there, let it sink for about 3 to 5 seconds. Really depends on what cover you're fishing. If you're fishing stuff that's super shallow, obviously you're not gonna let it sink at all. If you're fishing deeper drop-offs, I like to let it sit for about 5 seconds. I've even had bass come up there and hit that bait on the fall before you even start moving the thing. You guys see my reel giving it about half turns each time. This is a 7:3 to 1 gear ratio. That seems to be perfect. You'll want to start off by visually seeing it, seeing what those turns do to it, but eventually you kind of get a feel for it in the water, how far you need to turn it. Last lure I want to try today is going to be this Bladebait here. Bladebait is also one of the best lures of winter besides a jerkbait and a drop shot. I would definitely take those 1 and 2, but Bladebait is a good number 3 option. Bladebaits excel when you have rock, which is what we're throwing at here. We have this boat ramp and we have a big rock drop off. Obviously their weakness is definitely going to be timber, so you can't throw it anywhere near wood or you're going to be out of luck there. But around rock they work really well. They work best if you can find schools of fish. I don't really like to use it as a search bait necessarily. I more like to use it when I've already found fish, but I feel like this ramp is a pretty high percentage area, so we're gonna try to toss around here a little bit and see if we can't find us at least 1 fish for the day. Got a ½ ounce, so I can really bomb that bad boy out there. Oh yeah. To fish a Bladebait, you wanna let it sink to bottom, semi-slack line, starting to see a theme here. Then what I wanna do is I wanna reel down my slack, I wanna pull up, just till I feel the vibration of the blade, and then reel down my slack as I bring my rod down, returning to that semi-slack line. Again, pull up, reel my slack, semi-slack line. Pull up, reel my slack, semi-slack line. And I'm not trying to get it very far off the bottom. I'm only trying to get it about 6 inches off the bottom. So we wiggle, 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 and then we float back down. Wiggle, 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 float back down. This is really good for steep points. Steep points or even long tapering points, it doesn't really matter. As long as there's a bunch of rock there and not a bunch of tree to get hung up on, that's where this guy's really gonna excel. High percentage areas, or like I said, if you can find fish on the graph first, then it's gonna be a really good bait to work with. And that just mimics a dying bait fish, slowly floating back down to the bottom. Right now, I just have this point that comes out here and I'm just casting across this point. Just kind of hopping it where the drop off is. Letting it sink the bottom. Semi-slack line, pull it up, reel down the semi-slack line, pull it up, reel down the semi-slack line. You can follow those rocks. I'm kind of getting hung up down there. But that's kind of what I want in a way. Obviously, I don't want to get hung up fully, but I want to know I'm on that rocky bottom coming through there. All right, let's head back to the ramp, talk about our day. All right, guys, that is gonna wrap it up. Today was an absolute brutal day of winter fishing. The point of going out in winter is to catch big giant bass, but a lot of times there's gonna be days when you catch nothing. The most important thing is to go out there and make sure you're consistently learning and consistently trying new things. I made a major mistake today in the way I dressed. I only wore a sweater and jeans because it was gonna be 55 degrees outside, but with the wind blowing 15 to 20 miles an hour, it really took its toll on me. In winter, the #1 most important thing is safety, and close second is gonna be comfortability. And today, I was not comfortable whatsoever, and when you're not comfortable, you don't fish as well. But I hope you guys got a ton of tips from the video, whether it's the drop shot, the jerk bait, or the blade bait. Those are my 3 favorite winter baits. Get out there, try to catch some winter fatties, and I cannot wait to see you guys on the next one.